Good evening. Tonight we dress in velvet and masks step into a house of music and mirrors and wait for a clock that will not tell the truth. This is A Death Before Midnight, a locked estate mystery of champagne secrets and a single breath taken at the wrong moment. If you enjoy these stories, please like and subscribe so the next case is waiting when sleep finds you. Settle in, let the orchestra tune and listen for the detail that everyone else misses. Chapter 1. The Masquerade begins. Snow feathered down over Blackthorn Hall as if the sky itself had taken to confetti. Motorcars lined the Crescent Drive, their lamps glowing through plumes of breath and winter steam. Inside, under chandeliers heavy with crystal, the Midwinter Masquerade ball had begun. Sir Lionel Graves, broad-shouldered, frost in his hair, stood at the head of the marble stair, receiving guests as if they were shipments at a dockyard. Beside him, Lady Eleanor Graves, all pale silk, and measured smiles held her mask like a question. A string quartet unspooled a waltz that made even the portraits consider dancing. Inspector Julien Marchand arrived without fanfare, invited as a courtesy after advising Sir Lionel on a security matter months ago. He wore a simple black domino mask, a white pocket square, and the habit of noticing what others did not. He let the rooms introduce themselves one by one. The ballroom breathed champagne and polish. The dining room set for the midnight toast gleamed with silver crystal, and an immense ormolu clock on the mantel, its Cupid frozen mid-flight. The library smelled of leather and good secrets. The winter garden held a thin music of dripping glass where melted frost tapped the panes. People have favorite rooms, Julian thought. Murderers do too. From a corner, Victor Harland, the journalist, raised his glass in mock salute. His smile never reached his eyes. "Ah, our quiet guest," he murmured. "I wonder if tonight will be dull enough for you." Julian's mouth made almost a smile. Dullness is underrated. Dr. Felix Rowe, angular and immaculate, passed with a physician's exact nod. Colonel Hargood, a red-faced man with a limp and a laugh to match, boomed something about the old days and whiskey that did not taste of flowers. Beatrice Vale, the housekeeper, moved like a tide through the staff. A nod here, a glance there, an empire of order conducted without noise. And Clara Dane, the maid in neat black, slipped invisibly in the spaces between laughter, carrying a tray of sugared almonds on small porcelain dishes. At 11 o'clock, Sir Lionel clapped for attention. "Friends, devils, angels, and those who are both the midnight toast is nearly upon us. Until then, enjoy the sins my cook has prepared." Laughter rose. The clock in the hall chimed the hour, exact, authoritative. Julian's eyes slid to Lady Eleanor. She clapped with everyone else, but her hands did not quite meet. Chapter 2. Champagne and Secrets. In the library, a small fire pretended to be summer. Shelves climbed toward the ceiling like dark ladders. Julian leaned by the window where frost traced ferns upon the glass. Victor Harland joined him the way a cat joins a fishmonger. "They say Sir Lionel's will is being rewritten," he said, casual as a cufflink. "They say many things." "They say too much usually," Julian replied. Victor took a sugared almond from a crystal dish, turned it in his fingers, did not eat it. "He has enemies. One does not become rich and steal and sleep like a lamb." His eyes flicked to Julian's sleeve. "If there's a story tonight, I'd like to be the first to print the truth and the last to be sued for it." "Truth rarely sues," Julian said. "It prefers to wait." The clock in the library read 11:15. In the gilt mirror, Julian caught the briefest reflection of Beatrice Vale at the library door, counting glasses on a passing tray with a glance that never touched them. In the winter garden, Lady Eleanor stood among palms away from the heat and noise. Dr. Rowe joined her, concerned, confidential. Julian stayed far enough not to hear their words, near enough to read their shapes. A doctor's hand rests differently on a wrist when it measures pulse from when it comforts fear. This one measured. Colonel Hargood told two young men a joke about gunpowder that once ended a dinner party in Paris. They laughed before he reached the punchline. The house gathered itself toward midnight like a breath. Chapter 3. The toast. At 11:58, the dining room doors opened. Gold, white, a forest of glass waiting for a single sound. The ormolu clock on the mantel shone with a soft vanity. Footmen poured champagne with a choreographed grace, each flute lifted from its own silver stand, engraved with a guest's initial. Tradition, Sir Lionel announced. Every year the same flutes, the same foolishness. His own glass bore a small G cut into the base, a private mark. Julian stood 2 places down from Victor Harland. Lady Eleanor sat to Sir Lionel's left, pale and perfect as a leaf pressed in a book. Dr. Rowe opposite. Colonel Hargood near the end, already pink with sentiment. Beatrice Vale supervised the last placements, a queen in plain livery. At 11:57, a faint flicker ran through the chandeliers. At 11:58, the lights dipped again longer, a slow curtain, and returned. Sir Lionel lifted his glass. To friends, to enemies, to the year that has the decency to end, to... He stopped, blinked, frowned, as if the word had slipped behind a piece of furniture. He drew breath. It did not come. His face went a shade too pale, then a shade too blue. The glass trembled, shattered. Liquid bright on white cloth. Lady Eleanor Rowe's chair skidding back with a scrape that cut the room in half. Dr. Rowe was already moving, rounding the table, 2 fingers at the neck, the other hand. To the jaw a doctor's practiced geometry of emergency. Clear the room, he snapped. Now! No one moved. The ormolu clock ticked, self-satisfied, and did not chime. Sir Lionel's breath did not return. His eyes fixed on something the rest of them could not see. The room narrowed to a point, then widened again without him in it. The hall clock struck 12, deep, slow, indifferent. Chapter 4. The locked room. In the aftermath, the dining room doors were bolted on Julian's order staff, inside and out placed where they could be counted. The guests, white-faced, remained. Dr. Rowe covered Sir Lionel's body with a linen napkin pulled with ceremonial care. Julian's voice cut through noise softly and therefore absolutely. No one leaves this room. No one touches a glass, a plate, a decanter. Constable. Hargreaves, sir. The colonel snorted at that, then realized the name did not belong to him. Julian nodded to a uniformed man hovering at the threshold. Post 2 men at each door. Windows are latched, yes? From the inside, sir, Beatrice Vale answered. They always are in winter. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were not. Julian stepped to the mantel, examined the ormolu clock. 11:57. He wound a small key at its side. It refused him tight. He listened. It ticked, but it did not chime with the hall clock. He lowered the key, looked back across the table. 10 flutes, 10 shallow crescents of foam. Sir Lionel's glass in translucent ruin. The decanter of champagne stood cool and faceted the level an inch below the collar. No separate bottle at Lionel's place. The footman swore all had been poured from the same source within minutes under Beatrice's eye. Julian lifted the decanter to the light. No clouding, no sediment. He poured a little into a clean glass, swirled it, and did not drink. To Victor he said, Mr. Harland, if truth were a gas, which of us would choke first? Me, obviously, Victor said, hoarsely. and almost smiled at his own gallows. Julian set the glass down. Poison likely, but not in the decanter. His gaze shifted to the scattered crystal shards of Sir Lionel's flute catching lamplight like snow. He crouched, and with a folded napkin, lifted the stem base engraved with the discreet G. Around the inside of the rim, a faint opal sheen shivered where the light was strongest. Lacquer, he said quietly. Or something like it. Dr. Rowe joined him, face drawn. If it were a coating of prussic or a bitter oil, it would perfume the room with almonds, Julian said. And it does not. Another trick, then. Lady Eleanor stood very still, one hand on the back of her chair, as if the furniture might decide to fall without her. Her eyes were on the clock. Not on the body, on the clock. Julian rose. Beatrice, where are the flutes stored? In a velvet-lined drawer in the butler's pantry, sir, each on its own silver stand. And who laid them tonight? I did, sir, with Clara. Then we shall look. Chapter 5. The Widow and the Will. They left the room in pairs under watch to prevent whispered alibis from coagulating into truth. In Sir Lionel's study, Lady Eleanor sat on a low chair near the fire hands, folded neatly terribly. Julian said nothing for a time. Grief, like poison, works better when undisturbed. At last she spoke. He would have preferred a speech, she said, the voice of a woman who had practiced not crying. He liked exits. He left none, Julian said. Not even a chime. Her eyes moved to his, briefly startled. You noticed. He set that mantel clock 3 minutes slow, Julian said, so that he could arrive late to his own midnight. She almost smiled, and did not. He thought it charming. Charm is a solvent, Julian said. It loosens what people mean to keep. She looked into the fire. Are you asking if I killed him? I am asking what you are afraid I will find. Silence, thin as ice, stretched. Earlier this afternoon, a courier brought papers, she said at last. A draft of a new will. He meant to sign at midnight. It would have left me comfortable, but not safe. He liked the feeling of a leash in his hand. And who else knew of this draft? Dr. Rowe manages much more than fevers. Beatrice runs the house, you think she merely dusts. Victor, of course, knows everything at a price, and for a price. Colonel Hargood knows only yesterday. And Clara? She knows how to vanish while standing still. Eleanor's lips trembled once, and then learned not to. Julian inclined his head. Thank you. As he reached the door, she said, he changed the flute stands last year. Said the old ones were too wobbly. They look identical, but they are not. Chapter 6. Whispers in the library. In the butler's pantry, Velvet cradled 10 silver stands for the flutes each with a small clip to hold the stem secure. 9 were plain. 1, if you pressed the clip and turned the base a quarter, released a tiny pin that rose like a thorn inside the stem's cradle. Julian tested it with a wooden skewer. The pin snapped the skewer tip neatly. He looked up at Beatrice. Her face did not move. Clever little finger, he murmured. A thorn to pierce a bubble. In case of wobble, sir, Beatrice answered evenly. In case of an ampule sealed in the base of a glass, more likely, Julian said. A fragile capsule beneath a replaceable false coin of crystal. Invisible under wine. Break the ampule, release a dose, no scent, no trace in the decanter. Clara's eyes widened. Sir, I just polish and place. I never... Quiet, child, Beatrice said gently. Julian examined the velvet tray. The single trick stand left a faint impression where it usually sat. Its present slot was different. Someone moved it tonight, he said. Someone arranged that Sir Lionel's monogrammed flute, when set upon its stand, would conceal a dose in its base. Victor. Harlan leaned in the pantry doorway, cynical as a cufflink. And when did it break? At 11:58, when the lights dipped, Julian said. Not by accident, but by signal. Who controls the house lighting? Beatrice's silence was as useful as a map. We had electricians in last month rewiring the ballroom circuits, she said at last. The dining room can be dimmed from the servants' corridor, for effect. And who stands there at toasts? Julian asked. I do, Beatrice said. Clara made a small sound. Mrs. Vale. Beatrice's hand barely moved, and the sound ended. Chapter 7. The Clock That Lied. Back in the dining room, Julian stood before the mantel clock. He lifted it surprisingly heavy and turned it gently. On the underside, a new felt pad had been pasted to protect the ormolu feet. Beneath the felt, an access panel, recently unscrewed and replaced. Inside the case, tucked like a guilty thought, lay a small battery-driven vibrator, no larger than a matchbox, wired to tremble for 2 seconds at the press of a switch. He set the clock down, touched the case, imagined it in place at 11:58, its feet humming. The vibration would travel into the mantel, into the silver stands arrayed nearby. Only the trick stand was sensitive to it, a spring calibrated to pop the thorn pin upward and shatter the capsule hidden in Sir Lionel's flute base. No need to touch the glass. No need to poison the decanter. No smell. No fuss. Just a clock that lied and a switch in the corridor. Julian turned. The room gave him a silence with edges. Mrs. Vale, he said very gently. Would you show me your hands? Beatrice Vale presented them, quick, controlled. In the web between thumb and forefinger, a tiny burn bloomed. The mark of a soldering iron, used recently. On her wrist, almost hidden beneath cuff, a smear of conductive graphite. Who pays you, Mrs. Vale? Julian asked. Or do you pay yourself in peace? Her mouth trembled once, and then like the widow's learned not to. No one pays me, she said. I pay this house with my life. He would have dismissed half the staff by New Year's. The new will made that easy. He called it efficiency. He called it modern. He never called it hunger. And so you made time do what you wanted, Julian said, almost kindly. You built a clock that serves those he would have thrown into winter. Dr. Rowe stepped forward, shock and something like relief in his face. Good God, woman. Beatrice turned to him. Did you think I would let you drug his heart at midnight and call it providence? Yes, doctor, I saw the files in your case. I am not the only one who planned a different morning. Julian looked at Rowe. The physician's eyes answered with an exhausted surrender. Tincture of aconite, he said quietly, in his heart pills. He would have taken them after the toast. He always did. I intended dose, not death. A fright to postpone. His signing. Eleanor would have had time to find a solicitor of her own. I meant to save her. And yourself, Victor said from the doorway. Seeing as Lionel owned half your practice on paper. Rowe's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Julian turned to Lady Eleanor. And you? She looked at the floor. I planned nothing. I only hoped. Which is a kind of crime, I suppose. Julian nodded to Hargreaves. The constable stepped to Beatrice's side. Her chin lifted, not proud, simply finished. Where is the switch? Julian asked softly. In the servants' corridor behind the tapestry of the hunting scene, Beatrice answered. I wired it when the electricians were here. No one noticed. Men rarely do when a woman is carrying a tray. And the ampule? Built by a watchmaker in the village who owed me a favor. A glass disc sealed to the flute base with shellac. Enough dose to stop him before he finished his boast. Victor let out a breath that might have been a laugh and might have been fear, You'll hang, he said softly. Beatrice's eyes were level. So did my husband 12 years ago for stealing bread. He hung by the neck of poverty, not a rope. He never learned a trade again. He died in a lodging house, while this house threw away meat enough to feed a street. Julian's voice did not change. You will not speak further. Not until you have counsel. She inclined her head. Very good, sir. Chapter 8. The Doctor's Mistake. In Sir Lionel's study, Julian opened a little mahogany pillbox Roe had carried earlier. A faint white dust lined the bottom like frost. He dabbed the glass rod, smelled nothing, tasted less. He did not need to. Some truths you feel the way you feel a storm before it knows its own name. You understand, Doctor, that intention does not mend method, he said. Rose sat spine bent, as though someone had removed a splint. I understand. You meant to frighten him. Postpone a signature, save a woman and yourself. But you also brought poison to a room where others had better plans. Roe nodded once. I will make a statement. Julian closed the box. Make none without a solicitor. Roe gave a dry smile. Do you sleep at night, Inspector? When I have arranged my thoughts, Julian said. It is the same thing, but cleaner. Chapter 9. The Confession Behind the Mask. The ball had ended, of course. The orchestra packed velvet into cases with the care one gives to instruments and grief. Guests left like ghosts called off a stage. Snow thickened in a quiet way that meant morning would be kind to no one. Julian stood alone in the ballroom. Masks lay on the long table like shed lies. He picked one up, a simple black domino, turned it, set it down. Lady Eleanor joined him, pale with the beginning of shock. Is it always like this? She asked. The neatness at the end? It is not neat, he said. It is only over. She looked at him as though that were a new word. Your husband changed the clock to flatter himself, Julian said. Beatrice changed it to kill him. The doctor changed a heart to save one and would have ended too. The journalist changed facts into coins. The colonel changed the past into a story he could drink. Only the maid changed nothing and saw everything. Clara, Eleanor whispered. She will give evidence, Julian said. And then she will look for a different house. Eleanor's hand tightened at her side. I will pay her wages for a year. Julian inclined his head. That would be a good beginning. Chapter 10. A Death Before Midnight. Dawn came low and colourless, the way winter prides itself on doing. Police motors made clean tracks in the snow where party tires had scribbled. In the dining room, men carried the body with the kindness professionals give strangers. The Ormolu clock sat on the mantel, dignified, refusing to chime. Julian walked the length of the terrace, snow chattering underfoot. The lake lay ironed flat beyond the yew hedges. In the glass, he saw the house looking back at itself, learning its new shape. Hargreaves joined him, stamping warmth into his boots. We'll have the statements in town by noon, sir. Good, Julian said. Funny about the time, Hargreaves added, squinting at the pale sky as if it kept a secret. What do you call a night like this when midnight comes and somebody doesn't? Julian watched the room where the clock sat and answered without smiling. We call it what it is, Constable. A death before midnight. The constable nodded, satisfied in a way that uses very little of the word. Inside, someone drew curtains against the morning because people do when it has been too much of a night. In the quiet that followed, the house settled the way rooms settle when they know the loudest person has left them. The crystal was washed, the silver counted, the floor swept. A clock that lied kept ticking, waiting for a hand that would not set it right. Julian put on his gloves. He looked once toward the ballroom where masks had slept, toward the library where a sugared almond still waited in a dish untouched, toward the pantry where a velvet tray held one stand that did not belong. He arranged his thoughts the way he arranged a tie. Then he went out into the clean, cold morning, and the snow took his footprints and made them ordinary. The world is always like that in the end. What is clever becomes simple. What is hidden becomes furniture. What is murder becomes law. And somewhere behind a window, a woman learned how to breathe in a room that did not have his name in it. The hall clock struck the quarter hour right on time for the first time that night. And if anyone thought they heard a second bell, small metallic, from the mantel, it was only the house remembering for a moment what it had been made to do.